My name is Josh Berer. I'm a calligrapher. I'm based here in Washington. I want to talk about this piece that we have on the wall here. So, first of all, I realize that this is in Arabic, and we're in America, and so not many of us are going to necessarily speak this language. And so there's this immediate barrier to understanding what's going on in this piece because we don't speak the language that it is in. So if you give me a minute, I'm going to kind of bring it all full circle and hopefully explain what we're doing here. So I'm going to give you like 2 minutes of like really quick the past 500 years of Islamic calligraphy history. So what's amazing is as Islam kind of spread throughout the world, every society, every culture that it met interpreted calligraphy in its own unique way. And within a generation, as Islam came to a country, that particular society developed its own unique relationship with calligraphy. So it varied in form, it varied in function even. But within a couple of generations, one particular culture had kind of risen above the rest and was recognized as like kind of global center of calligraphy, and that was Ottoman Turkey. And so for the past 500 years, Ottoman Turkey, or Turkey itself, has been the kind of global capital of calligraphy, such that I, as an American, when I became interested in calligraphy well over 10 years ago, I asked an Iraqi friend of mine, where should I go to learn calligraphy? And he said, Istanbul. Without even thinking twice, it is the international hub. And there still exists in the city an unbroken line of transmission of calligraphers going back to the 15th century. So the first lesson that I received from my teacher in 2012 was the first lesson that he received from his teacher in 81, who received it from his teacher in 65. And you can go back all the way to the 15th century with this unbroken line of transmission, teacher to student. So that's kind of the framework of how I came to learn calligraphy, and that manifests in this particular piece in its own kind of subtle way, and that is just the form that it takes. So this bold, small, 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 bold, small, small, small with like decorated, illuminated insets, that's called a kitta, and that is like a mainstay standard of Ottoman calligraphy. I came to calligraphy through my love for Arabic, and my love for Arabic was born from living with the Bedouin community in southern Palestine. So there is, in that particular community, like all Bedouin communities, an incredibly strong and vibrant culture of recited oral poems. And the nature of oral poems is that unless you record them, they kind of get lost to the sands of time, unless people continue to memorize them and pass them on. There was a fellow in the mid-century period who was an incredibly influential person within the Bedouin society. His name was Musaleh bin Amr. And he was a judge, he was a poet, he was a shaykh of the community, and he has an incredibly wide and vast over of poems. And lucky for us, an American ethnographer spent the 70s and 80s with a microphone and a tape recorder recording all of this Bedouin poetry, he then transcribed it into actual physical Arabic and then translated it into English. And so it kind of became accessible to the rest of us. This particular poem is an extended poem called If Only You'll Hear the Advice I Provide. And it's an old man speaking to a younger man about how to live a good life, how to be a productive member of society, how to be a happy person. And it's all of the kind of cultural traits that this older guy has learned through a life of experience that he's then trying to pass on to the younger generation. So that's the actual physical message that we're talking about, because one of the things that I love about calligraphy is that it is art, but it also is, in its most fundamental form, a transference of information. It is not just a picture, it is information that is being passed on, it has a message. So I, growing up in the kind of Western American art scene, would constantly hear people asking of art that they saw on the wall, what is the artist trying to say? What is the meaning of this work? And when I encountered calligraphy finally, all of those questions were suddenly answered because the work itself is the message. And so as a calligrapher, you have the ability to speak through other people's words. So you can go back like a generation like I did, or you could go back 500 years and pull words from poets or philosophers or whatever. And in so doing, by writing them and by displaying them, you are speaking through those words. They're not your words, but they are kind of your words. They're not your thoughts, but by highlighting them and bringing them forward in the form of calligraphy, you're commenting on our world by the words of people who came before us. And so that, I find a great degree of meaning in that. So we talked a little bit about the physical form that it takes in that it's an Ottoman-style kitta with the different styles of calligraphy alternating. Historically, if this was an Ottoman piece of calligraphy or a Turkish piece of calligraphy, these would look really different. But because the particular poem that I'm working on is a Palestinian poem, I chose instead to use Palestinian designs or Palestinian embroidery patterns, actually, in the illumination panels. So that kind of brings a little bit more cultural relevance to the actual words that I'm working in. But then, finally, as I mentioned, with each culture kind of finding their own voice within calligraphy, I chose to use an American design aesthetic for the final border on the outside. So these designs here are not Palestinian, not Turkish. They're instead taken from like the Art Deco and Art Nouveau language of pattern of the American 20th century. So it kind of brings, again, like this idea that, okay, so we're dealing with a Palestinian poem. So we've got Palestinian elements. We're dealing with a Turkish-taught calligrapher, so it's Turkish form. Working in America, we have to kind of reinvent what it is that we're doing, like all cultures who encounter this art. And so, yeah, bring the American design thing in at the end. There's a translation, by the way. I know it's kind of late in the game, but there's a translation in the QR code. Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So one of the other things that I really like about calligraphy and producing a piece of calligraphy is that you're dealing with it from two completely different kind of tangents or perspectives. One is purely physical. It's like, how do you marble the paper? How do you dye the paper? How do you prepare it for calligraphy? How do you cut your pens for calligraphy? Make the ink, all the rest. That's just like an equation that's dealing with like dyes and pigments and methodologies that have been in place for a very long time. And then the other side is totally metaphysical. It's all upstairs. It's semantic. It's what kind of text are we dealing with? So in answer to your question, on a physical level, you just, to make marbled paper, you thicken a bath of water with seaweed, carrageenan seaweed, and then you float paints, which are hand-ground paints that you add ox gall, which is it's like a fluid from the gallbladder of an ox, which acts as a surfactant. So it gets into the paint, and instead of sinking into the water, it just coasts along the top, and it also prevents the paints from kind of mingling and turning into just one amorphous brown sludge. They all stay independent. So yeah, it's called ebru.